very common for some reason pitfall that you'll see and mistakes that you see made by beginners in Adobe Illustrator and a lot of vector programs. Really, really horrifically ugly looking gradients. So one of the things in the rubric, any gradients are subtle and not distracting. Really, really easy for gradients to just jump off the page in a bad way. So let's show you some good examples first, and then I'll show you some bad ones. So notice that this kind of looks fairly realistic. I have gradients here, but they are very subtle. They definitely don't cross the color wheel, and they don't jump out at you. They just add just a touch of realism. So let me show you some of these gradients. This one, for example, it is going from a white to a white. And the only thing that changes is the opacity. Notice that that is 0% gray or white, and the opacity changes from 100% to 30%. Okay? Opacity changes in the same hue are not a drastic change, often very good. Okay, look at this one. Okay, notice that we have 100% here, we have 100% there. So the opacity is the same, but the color, if I can double click here, the color is not a significantly different color. It's just a little bit less saturated on the edge to give us a little bit of a vignette. Okay, something like this. There's two or three gradients here that are really giving us some nice color. This speaker shadow right here, notice that it is a 100% gray or black and an 80% gray. Okay, just a 20% difference in that value there. So again, not much of a difference in hue. Now here, if we go here and we look at the camera blue burst, okay, there's a little bit of a difference in hue. Okay, added a little bit more of a purple, just a touch of red to this blue here, a little bit darker. Okay, but still within a very close range. I also want to point one other thing out. Let's go back to this one. Okay, when you're trying to get an effect going, pay attention to the blending options under your transparency, because usually if you choose multiply, screen, or overlay, then that's going to mix that gradient in with the object behind it in a pleasing way if you've chosen your colors carefully. So let's talk about just a touch of color theory as it applies to gradients. Okay, this is a color wheel. You should know a little bit about this color wheel. But notice gradients look okay. I'm just going to show you some examples. As long as you don't go too many steps away from each other, right? So let's start with a green. We'll just start with a green like that, okay? And then this other one, like a lime. See, that's not too bad. I can even go to a yellow. That starts to get a little extreme, but if I mute it just a little bit, it's not too bad. But notice, as I get further and further away, it starts to get more and more muddy or brown in the middle. It's because opposite colors will create a brown. And you see that as I get really far away and I'm an opposite, it's just very high contrast in a really negative way, and the middle gets really muddy. Let me show you another example. Let's start over here with a purple. Okay, and as long as I stay just a couple steps, and I can even jump up and down within that purple, and notice how that's not too bad. But if I start getting too many steps away, it starts to get really, really ugly really quickly. Okay, notice I'm only just 2 or 3 steps away, and already I'm getting kind of a little bit of that mud, and if I come all the way over here, it's just way too high contrast, and that muddy middle is really, really ugly. Okay, so 2 main things that you want to pay attention to with your gradients is make sure that they are subtle and not distracting, and usually that is staying either within a different value range of the same hue, or just going a step or 2 away from the hue. No drastic changes in hue. Don't ever really cross the color wheel completely and start mixing opposite colors because you get that brown. And the other thing is pay attention to your transparency palette. And you have these blending options here. They will often help a lot. Those 2 things combined are going to help your gradients look really good. Otherwise, I would recommend not using a gradient because they typically look very, very ugly in vector graphics if used incorrectly. Very old, very dated, very 1992.